Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin, and I'm finally here in the flesh. 2 weeks ago, I had COVID, so we had a rerun, even though it was the greatest of reruns. And last week, of course, was Thanksgiving, and we had a special. But here we are together, and I want to thank you for being here. We have an incredibly important show tonight. We'd like to talk about democracy versus autocracy. This is what Biden says all the time. They said this election was about democracy, and if the Democrats don't win, we will cease to have a democracy, because all of us who oppose them, of course, are semi-fascists, whatever that means. I'm here to prove to you that we are living under an increasingly threatening police state under the Democrats and Joe Biden. And in fact, what they are doing is so destructive to this society, I don't know if we can reverse course. You have Mitch McConnell in the Senate right now cutting deals with Chuck Schumer. He's not even focused on these things. And you have a number of Republicans, basically 5, in the House of Representatives, give or take, who are busy fighting over the silverware on the dining room table in the cafeteria over there at the House of Representatives. Well, I'm here to talk about big issues and your liberty. The Democrat Party does not give a damn about the Bill of Rights. It does not give a damn about your liberty. In fact, it views you as an obstacle. That's why they keep talking about you, the deplorables, you, the semi-fascists, you, MAGA, and on and on and on, attacking tens of millions of Americans, hardworking, tax-paying Americans who do nothing but contribute to this country. So I want to go through some of the issues that are taking place and that we need to be attentive to. About a month ago, the Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee put together a 1,000-page document with footnotes, attribution on the violations of your liberties and the violations of federal law by the Federal Bureau of Investigation under this Department of Justice. Here it is. Here it is. Right here. 2 what we used to call Manhattan phone books of information, page after page after page after page. Am I the only one who's read it? Have you seen a news organization actually go through it? No. Now, you know, if the Democrats put something like this out, they'd be hanging on every syllable. They'd be citing every footnote. This is a crucially important document. And among other things, what they found was, under Biden, the FBI is artificially inflating statistics about domestic violent extremism in the nation. The FBI is abusing its counterterrorism authority to investigate parents who spoke at school board meetings. We know this. The FBI has abused the foreign intelligence authorities to spy on American citizens, including people associated with the campaign of President Trump in 2016. The FBI is clearing the Bureau of employees who dissent from its woke leftist agenda. Whistleblowers have explained how the FBI's political meddling in dragging the criminal side of the Bureau down as resources are pulled away from recent law enforcement duties. That's just the beginning of it. What else is going on in the Biden police state? Well, let's take a look from Fox. New DHS Disinformation Board documents reveal deep big tech collusion, and they contradict the sworn testimony of Mayorkas, the head of the DHS. Among other things, they were coordinating, meeting with, colluding with, if you will, top executives at Twitter before Elon Musk took over, which is why they hate Elon Musk, of course. And they have a number of documents, including emails on this now, about the collusion between DHS and the big oligarch tech companies. And what were they doing? They were monitoring you. They were monitoring anybody who disagreed with the line coming out of the Biden administration. Monitoring you in violation of your First Amendment rights. The government's not free to use private companies as front organizations. What else? Even the ACLU, which we rarely hear from these days, surreal stingray secrecy, uncovering the FBI's surveillance tech secrecy agreements. The FBI has refused to confirm or deny if it has recent records about its practice of requiring local police to sign strict non-disclosure agreements prior to purchasing invasive cell phone tracking technology. But the FBI acknowledged imposing these non-disclosure agreements on local police and even recognized problems created by the practice. So what is the FBI trying to hide now? And do the feds really not appreciate the irony of refusing to confirm or deny the existence of secrecy agreements? What's next? We have here a peek inside the FBI's unprecedented January 6 geofence dragnet. Google provided investigators with location data for more than 5,000 devices as part of the federal investigation into the attack of the U.S. Capitol. They didn't get a warrant, not on any individual, not for these 5,000. It's unbelievable what's taking place here. The FBI's biggest ever investigation included the biggest ever haul of phones from controversial geofence warrants, not normal warrants. Court records show a filing in the case of one of the January 6 suspects, David Ryan, shows that Google initially identified 5,723 devices as being in or near the U.S. Capitol during the riot. And the filing suggests that dozens of phones that were in airplane mode during the riot or otherwise out of cell service were caught up in the trawl. Nor could users erase their digital trails later. In fact, 37 people who attempted to delete their location data following the attacks were singled out by the FBI for greater scrutiny. And it goes on, these general warrants that are taking place. More. You've heard about Twitter, you've heard about Google. Let me tell you about Facebook. New York Post, the FBI has a politically one-sided surveillance partnership with Facebook under the apparent name Operation Bronze Griffin, according to this bombshell report that nobody's read but me, and apparently somebody at the New York Post. The report broadly outlines the FBI's alleged pro-Democrat political bias, just days after revelations of a secret Facebook portal through which authorities can request the deletion of alleged misinformation from the world's top social media platform. Montana Attorney General concerned that FedEx and UPS may be tracking gun ownership for the White House. FedEx and UPS have changed shipping policy on firearms in a way that allows easy supervision and cataloging of sellers and buyers, Attorney General of Montana says. What? More. Former Fed president. Government snooping on bank transactions over $600, a massive search without a search warrant. Remember this proposal? Well, they're still pushing it. And there's no guarantee that they're not already doing it. A massive search without a warrant of everybody who takes in $600 or spends $600. What do you think they need 87,000 new IRS agents for? This still might be going on. And let me tell you something, even if it's not, they intend to do it. They intend to do it. What else? House Democrats now have Donald Trump's taxes, Treasury Department indicates. The Biden Treasury Department has now given the Democrats, in the final 2 or 3 weeks of their reign over at the House, Donald Trump's 6 years of taxes. Now, what are they going to do with that over 3 weeks? Oh, they have legislative issues. No, they don't. They're not doing anything legislative. They're spending money left and right like a bunch of rabid Marxists. But that's all. What are they going to do with Donald Trump's 6 years of tax returns? They're going to leak them. They're going to leak them. So much for security and privacy. What do you think they'll do to yours? Also with Donald Trump, since when do you appoint a special counsel to investigate somebody who's announced for president in the opposite party, and at least now has the highest poll ratings of any other Republican? You pick an individual who went after a Republican governor and was reversed by the Supreme Court unanimously because of his tactics, his violation of the Constitution. You pick an individual who was involved in the attack on the Tea Party and conservative groups, edging on the IRS and Lois Lerner to go after them. That's the guy you pick, whose wife did a documentary on Michelle Obama, and whose wife has contributed, and mother-in-law has contributed heavily to the Biden campaign? I mean, over what? Documents? All the lies about nuclear codes being sold and distributed and so forth. The January 6th issue, you're using SWAT teams to go after former advisors to the president. You're handcuffing them in public places. You're taking phones away from attorneys in violation of attorney-client privilege. Oh, the crime-fraud exception. To investigate what? That Donald Trump was the head of some kind of conspiracy on January 6th, when all he was doing was challenging the election, which presidents have done and candidates have done for God knows how long. They have no evidence that ties them to violence, and yet they're breaking every tradition, every rule. Every tradition, every rule in this country is special counsels to be appointed to investigate a sitting president or his family or his associations, not the candidate who might oppose a sitting president. We have never seen this any time in our life. What else is this administration doing with its police state tactics? It is ordering the shutting down of oil drilling sites. Whatever happened to private property rights and limited government here? It is crippling refineries. It is eliminating pipelines. Wow. Sounds fascistic to me. Using regulations and red tape to prevent development and capital investment in fossil fuels. In fossil fuels, they're concentrating the control of government in the hands of left-wing bureaucrats and politicians. Wow. That doesn't sound right to me. Does it sound right to you? No, I don't think so. And there's more. The Biden administration takes aim at big chicken. They're investigating big chicken because the price of chicken's going up. Sure, that has nothing to do with the wild-eyed spending in Washington and massive inflation. They're unleashing investigators against big meat. The meat industry, the chicken industry's price fixing, they have no evidence, not even today. The meat industry's price fixing, they have no evidence, not even today. But they're unleashing the feds against them. What else are they doing? They're doing a lot. They're unleashing the feds against pro-lifers. It's unbelievable. They brought lawsuits against the state of Texas because they don't agree with their abortion policy, even though the states have authority now under the Supreme Court Dobbs ruling. This is what the Department of Justice is. It's the political enforcement wing of the Biden administration. Sues the Texas legislature and Texas government over abortion, sued Georgia and the Republican legislature when they were tightening up their laws, claiming that they were violating the Voting Rights Act. It was a lie. It failed. They're literally suing the state of Alabama for outlawing the use of these various chemicals to prevent puberty and so forth with kids. They're suing Alabama to prevent it. In other words, any policy or political disagreement they have, they're sending in federal law enforcement, the FBI and the Federal Department of Justice, to challenge them and to fight them. Now, Elon Musk, you see, Twitter used to be the plaything of the Democrat Party and the Biden administration. Biden announces that his relationship with other countries are worthy of being looked at. So he's sending a signal to the Department of Justice, investigate this guy. Of course, his press secretary says, we're keeping a close eye on Elon Musk's Twitter. What are you keeping a close eye on his Twitter for? You're worried about foreign entanglements? Then investigate Biden with a special counsel. How is it possible that he's sitting president, who has all these multiple ties and multi-millions of dollars from these foreign governments, isn't under investigation by a special counsel? What else? Biden announces that the Department of Justice should prosecute those who divide the January 6th committee subpoenas, which is what they're doing. Again, he sends a message. I mentioned this earlier. Department of Justice ramps up charges against pro-life activists. This is Fox. 4 last year, 26 this year. Department of Justice sues Texas over new abortion law. Department of Justice sues Georgia over its new voting rights law. And on and on and on it goes. If this isn't police state or a police state-like, then what the hell is? You're not safe online. Your emails and your texts are not safe. Your communications with your lawyer, they're not safe. They're unleashing 87,000 new IRS agents, the same IRS that went after conservatives before. They're trying to put an ex-president in prison, violating every standard and tradition we've ever had in this country. They're using a Civil War law that was used against Confederates, against individuals who broke into the Capitol building in order to put them in prison for 20 years or more, while they're letting out people who used Molotov cocktails in New York City because they agree with their politics. The same Justice Department. These are very, very trying times. And when we look at China and we look at Iran, we're very, very concerned about what's taking place in those countries. But we better start paying attention to what the hell's happening in our own country.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.